Rahubat, our Musba'u Yasar, and to our YouTube family out there. This is going to be our weekly discussion. Uh, well, first of all, for those who do not know me, my name is Peti Sina Teptu Re'e, and I've been a 30-year student teacher of the profound doctrine of the master teacher, known to us as Nabab Yaa-nanan, also known as Dr. Malachi Z.K. York, who has been teaching us our ancient culture of Wu Sabat, also culture of Wu Nawab, which means it stands for those who make decisions based on sound right reasonability. And one of the things that we have been arguing as students of the master teacher and students of Wu Sabat, that our people in this day and time have not been making sound or reasonable decisions. And as students of Wu Sabat, we have dedicated ourselves to teaching our people to get back to our ancient culture of being able to make decisions once again based on sound right reasonability. And so we dedicate our lives, we dedicate our time to teaching this culture of of Wu Sabat, simply because the challenges that Black people are dealing with around the world are so phenomenal, and we're saying that those challenges only exist because of our decision making skills. And so when you look at the conditions that Black people are living in, and you see the negative, degraded conditions that we deal with all over the globe, we argue that's only due to our decision making skills. Our decisions are not sound and they're not reasonable. And so we are dedicating ourselves to correcting this reality, correcting these challenges of our people not making intelligent decisions, sound decisions. And this is what Wu Sabat is all about. This is what our culture, Wu Nawab, is all about. And as Sabians, this is what we're dedicated to. And so one of the things that we here at NoopooH.org and NoopooCC.com have dedicated ourselves is to put this information out in various ways. And so we're focused on uh, I guess teaching this information from that point of view, to be able to get this information out in different ways. And so we have our lectures that we're doing, and now we're doing these live question and answer classes. And excuse me. And so these live question and answer classes, we're basically setting them up, and we have three levels, or I should say, it's going to be in three parts. So the first part, that the way these classes are going to go, is we want to begin to introduce people into our principles, or the principles of Wu Sabat that we live by. And so that's going to be the first part of these discussions on Tuesday. And then the second part of these discussions is we're going to focus on the subject matter, specific topic that we are going to deal with for today, or for this particular episode. And then the third part is going to be question and answer, as well as we're also going to be having interviews. And so we're going to be bringing people on uh, through certain episodes. And so the third part will deal with the interviews as well as the question and answer format. And so for those individuals who have questions pertaining to what we teach, then we encourage individuals to ask those questions during that third session. Um, but that's not to say you can't ask questions throughout the session if it's pertinent to what we might be addressing. We have no problem, but we're going to try to stick to that format. Whereas the first part of these discussions, we're going to focus on, like I said, teaching you guys about the principles of Wu Sabat, the principles in which we live by, and so that everyone is clear as to what our purpose is and what our goals are and what our objectives are as being students of Wusabat. Excuse me. So, okay, so now I guess the one of the things I guess in when you're dealing with the principles that we teach is wow, it's a lot, but it's not complex, but it's a lot. So what I want to do is because I'm going to be sharing my screen and I'm going to show you guys some things. Let me see here, right here. Uh, let's see. So these are keywords all students of Wusabat / Wunawap must know. And this is what gets people into understanding the principles that we live by. Now, I recommend everyone who watched this episode, right, learn these key words because these key words is in essence based on our whole doctrine of everything that we teach is rooted in these particular key points that we are showing here. So it's 9 specific key points that we're showing, and these 9 particular points for the most part breaks down our whole doctrine almost once you begin to understand the complexity of these particular key points. So for instance, the first word that we have here is this word is not an English word, right? It's a Sabaean word. For instance, we have our own language, which is ancient Sabaean. Ancient Sabaean was taught, or excuse me, ancient Sabaean was spoken by our ancestors in ancient Ethiopia. They spoke Sabaean, in essence, in ancient Kemet, or what people identify as ancient Egypt. So the ancient language that we spoke was Sabaean, and in essence, Sabaean uh, means those who comes from Sebeptu, and this is the star constellation of Cyrus, the star constellation of Cyrus, and we're going to get into that in our episodes, trying to make that more clear as far as the language is concerned. But I just wanted to let you know. So we have our own language. We encourage all of our people to learn the language because the language is extremely key. Now, I also encourage. Uh, I always tell people we first of all we did a lecture on the science of language, and so I highly recommend everyone to watch that specific lecture. And I first of all, I always recommend people to watch our lectures more than once. So that's extremely important. Watch our lectures more than once. Let's see. So, okay, so the first word that we have here is called ashak. Ashak. If you guys can hear that, ashak. And that word basically means in our language divine love. Divine love, right? And that's one of the key principles of our culture. Our ancestors' whole culture was based on divine love. And so the word for divine love is ashak, ashak, okay? And that word means divine love. So that's a very important principle that we live by when you're dealing with divine love. Divine love is a frequency, it's a vibration that our ancestors vibrate on that the frequency of what we call divine love. Divine love exists in the realm we call Nupu. So for those who watched our lectures that deals with the African science of origins, we explain the 2 realms within the universe, which is the realm of Nupu and the realm of Zupu. When you're in the realm of Nupu, that energy, that frequency is based on Ashak, which is divine love. It's a vibration that all African people originate from, and we have the ability to tap into that frequency. Once you learn how to tap into the frequency of ashak, then all negativity could not penetrate you, because one of the problems that we're dealing with as a people is that we're constantly being influenced by negative energy, and that negative energy throws off our frequency, it throws off our vibration, and that is what's causing us to make bad and unintelligent decisions. And it's simply because we don't know how to stay in what we call the power of love, the power of ashak. We don't know how to maintain that frequency, because again, as Black people, we tend to get extremely emotional from certain situations. But the problem is, when you're not in the frequency of ashak, you lose your sense of reasonability. When people get upset, they can't reason correctly, they can't make intelligent decisions, and that's when you make mistakes. And so what we try to do is teach our people, once again, we must learn how to tap back into this frequency, the power of love, so that you will not be taken off your center. Okay, so the word ashak is that particular word, that term, and it's extraordinarily important that you understand or understand that particular principle, which is ashak. So definitely write that down, because we're going to be dealing with that principle a lot and trying to help those individuals get better comprehension of it. Now, the next principle is resurrection. Okay, so our whole doctrine is based on this concept of resurrection. Of course, this is a concept that people are familiar with through religion. They're familiar with it through Christianity, because Christianity talks about, Jesus Christ resurrected from the dead. Okay, but this is the actual ancient African principle. Now, for those who do not know, the major religions of Judaism, Islam, and Christianity were pretty much plagiarized from ancient Egyptian culture. And so the concept of resurrection was something that our ancient Africans taught. And what we meant by resurrection is the resurrection of one's consciousness. The resurrection of one's consciousness. Okay? We used to have a consciousness where we were in tune with nature, where we were in tune with existence and the universe. Okay? We've lost that ability as African people, and now we're in tune with McDonald's and Burger King and Mercedes Benz and Netflix, and the list goes on of the things that we're in tune with, in this day and time. And we must resurrect. We must get back to that. How can I say, the mentality that we once had before? This, what we will call a godlike mentality, to be in tune once again with the forces of nature. And that requires a resurrection of our consciousness. And it's a physical resurrection and a mental resurrection, meaning resurrection is about raising your vibration up into the higher realms, the realms where you can be in tune once again with the first principle, which is ashak. So you have to raise yourself up. And that's what resurrection is all about. Okay. And so, and that word gets a lot more deeper, excuse me. That word gets a lot more deeper. And then we're gonna cover that as well. The next principle is the principle of Ma'at, and the wisdom of Tahuti. Okay. Uh the principle of Ma'at and the wisdom of Tahuti. Now, we did a lecture on Ma'at, the African, I forget the name, what we called it, the African science of justice or something like that. But for those who have watched it, I always recommend watch that lecture again, because that principle is extremely important. In fact, our whole culture is based around Ma'at. African culture is based around the principles of Ma'at. Now, Ma'at stands for four primary principles, which is righteousness, justice, balance, and order. Okay. So it's extremely important that you learn the principle of Ma'at inside and out. And this is something we will be teaching and explaining this. And we have a lot of books on the principle of Ma'at that we're going to be showing. And, we'll get into the different types of books and literature that will explain this. And the next principle is the wisdom of Tahuti. The Wisdom of Tahuti. Now, we wrote a book actually called that, The Wisdom of Tahuti, that I highly recommend that you must read that book. Let me show it to you guys. Let me just find it if I can, so you see what I am referring to. Let's see. Okay, there we go. All right, so now this book right here is called The Wisdom of Tahuti. The Wisdom of Tahuti. And so we put this book out way back in the 1990s. And it's extremely important book. And one of the things that this book is going to teach you that our ancestors taught. Okay. And let me see if I can bring up um, some of the things that it's going to teach. Now, if you can see this here, let's see. Okay. Right here. This is from this particular book. This is a quote. It says the universe and all it contains is a mental creation of all. Verily indeed, all is mental, and the mind and the all are in all. And so what this book is trying to explain and teach is that our ancestors taught that all is mind. The universe itself exists as a universal mind. The universe itself exists as a universal mind, and our ancestors who understood that all is mind, and the universe has principles or a code of conduct that we live by, which is the principles of Ma'at. So once you understood that existence was all mental, then existence had a code of conduct, and that code of conduct was living according to the principles of Ma'at. And so I just needed to show you guys that. So that's the third thing that I wanted to introduce you to. Right. So the next concept, point, um, concept that we teach is that relationships. Now, in ancient African culture, our whole culture was always live of, for, and by each other. We always lived as a tribe, a community, a nation of people working for the betterment of each other. Okay. We teach that a relationship is our greatest commodity. Of course, we live in a world where they teach that money is your greatest commodity. And we argue no, relationships are the greatest commodity one could have. Unfortunately, because of so much division in the world, we as Black people are not cultivating our relationships, and we argue this is another one of the reasons why we're struggling and we're having a hard time as a people, because we've lost the concept of relationships, how to have strong, vibrant relationships, which starts with your family. And as everyone knows, the Black family, especially here in America, and it's happening abroad, has been almost shattered and obliterated. I mean, we don't even exist as families, let alone a community. Relationships are key. Relationships are key. In fact, through relationships, this is how we can circumvent the European system of economics, meaning that he set up a system where you don't have to have relationships, you just have to have money. So rather than living as a family and cooking and providing for one another, As long as you got money, you can go to IHOP and they'll fix you dinner, or you can go to Red Lobster and they'll fix you dinner. You don't need a relationship; you just need money. And so, money destroys relationships. Where we used to work with each other, support one another. Now we don't do that because we live in a culture where we just pay for whatever we want. We don't have to have no real commitment to each other anymore. And so, in order to fix the problems, we have to get back to the reality that relationships are key. Relationships, strong relationships are key. We must reestablish our relationships. So this is another principle that we teach that we must live by. Now, the next one is number 5. Number 5 is morphic resonance slash the matrix. Morphic resonance slash the matrix. Now, what is morphic resonance? Morphic means to change. Resonance means vibration. Morphic means to change, and resonance means vibration. So, what we teach is that the universe, being that the universe is mind and mental, right? It's a mental energy, mental vibration, and it vibrates. This energy, this mental energy vibrates, and it morphs and shapes. And when it morphs and shapes, when this vibration or this mental energy morph and shapes, it creates what is known as a matrix. And what are matrix? Matrices are the creation of existing things within the universe. So, for instance, every species is its own matrix. The human being is its own matrix. The different animals are their own matrix. Insects are their own matrix. Planets are their own matrix. And matrices come into existence because of morphic resonances that the universe produced. This is how creation comes into existence. Now, we taught and introduced this concept in our lecture series, The African Science of Existence, teaching about morphic resonance and matrices. So we have a lot to learn on what those concepts mean and how they relate to us, because the human body is made up of a matrix. In fact, I think I have an example of that. If I can find it, let's see. I can bring this up. And because what I like to show with this is a book we put out. It's called Who is God, the Female or the Male? And in this particular book, we talk about the matrix of the female chromosomes. The matrix of the female chromosomes. It's all mapped out in math. What she will look like, sound like, her growth, her genes, skin, hair, eyes, organs, it's all there. And so, as you can see, this is talking about the human body, the female body is made based on a matrix. It's made based on a matrix. And this is how species and living things manifest within creation. It's based on a morphic resonance, and that morphic resonance creates a matrix. And this is what creates this, different beings. So now let me move back away from that and go back to where it was. Now, next principle is soul, spirit, and a word called ach ach. Ach ach translate as ether. Everything is made up of ach ach. Again, this is one of our Sabaean words. It's not an English word. Ach ach is an ancient Egyptian word. And this is the energy that the universe is created from. And our soul and spirit is made up of ach ach, this ether energy, this energy substance we call ach ach. Okay, our soul and spirit. Now we also we put out many books on this subject matter. The subject matter is what is soul or spirit? What is soul or spirit? And so this is extremely important when you are studying our culture. We must relearn what soul and spirit actually is, because again, these are things that are not taught in this culture. Now, the next one is Leviathan. Another important word, another important concept you must learn. We put out many books on this subject matter. In fact, the master teacher wrote like 6 or 7 editions on this subject matter. The books called Leviathan. I think I have a copy of this book if I can find it, um, so that you can give you an idea. I do have a copy, and this right here is one of the books, one of the editions. Now, this edition of Leviathan, this one came out in 1990, I believe. That's when we released this book, 1989 or 1990. This particular book, and we put out about 6 different versions, or 6 or 7 different copies. The first edition of the Book of Leviathan, that came out in 1971. 1971. Okay. Oh, you know what? I'm up here talking. Now, for those who can hear me, I can see you guys are in the chat. Can y'all press 1? I just want to make sure everyone is hearing me loud and clear. Can you press 1 for those who are in the chat that can hear me loud and clear? Can you definitely press 1, the number 1, so that I know that everyone is hearing me. And so, again, for those who are in the chat, can you please press 1, and that way I know that you guys are hearing me. So that's good. So now let's see. Perfect. So now let me go back to where we at. Let's see. Let's go back. So we did Leviathan. The next one is the smac. Understanding what is the smac. Now, again, that goes back to a lecture we did, and we did a 4-part series on the African science of existence, and we talked about the smac. So this is extremely important that you guys must learn and must know what the smac actually means. The smac is an acronym. It stands for space, matter, and time. The smac stands for space, matter, and time. And so, again, if you only watch that lecture series once, I highly recommend watching that lecture series at least 3 times. Okay, it's a lot of information in there. It's very involved. I know it's extremely long, but it's extremely important to begin to comprehend what that principle is, because this, once you begin to comprehend the smac, it gives you a good comprehension of existence and how the universe functions. Okay, so that's extremely important to understand. This science is how the universe functions. Okay, and now, and the last point or word and concept, I should say, that you must know is pa'ut. Pa'ut. Now, pa'ut stands for, that's another Sabian word in our language, and that translates as all. Pa'ut. Okay? Pa'ut, it translates as all. So, what that word means is all existence. In fact, this is where the concept of, where the Christians and religious people get the concept of God from. What our ancestors taught was that all of existence or creation is the creative force. All is, we taught. All is, we taught. And so, all, we taught, you can't add to the all, because where would you get it from? And you can't take from the all, because where would you put it? And so the creative force is all. And this is a very important concept that our ancestors taught and lived by. We understood that existence, the creative force, we identify as the all of existence. And so when religious theology got a hold of this concept, this is where they came up with the concept of God. And they would teach things like God is omnipresent, omnipotent, all powerful, and omniscience, all knowledge. And the key phrase there is omni, which is all. And so the uh, religious theologies, what they got this concept obviously from our ancestors, but then they changed it, and then they started saying things like, but God exists in heaven, and God came down to earth, and God did this. And that changes the concept. That's not all, because all doesn't go anywhere. All is. And so when you start saying or trying to teach that God is doing something, then that's a specific being that exists within all. That is a specific being that exists within the all. So the concept, most of the religious concepts are talking about different beings or different entities that exist within all. They're not all, because all is. You can't add to all, because where would you get it from? And you can't take from all, because where would you put it? And so all is. That's extremely important. So, uh, you know, those are the words, and that is extremely important. And so everything that we're teaching will be based around these concepts, around these words. Okay. And so I wanted to introduce that to everyone. And for those who watch this video at a later date, definitely copy these words. And I'll be referring different literature that we put out to explain these different concepts, because these specific concepts and these specific words will shed, it'll make things clear based on our culture, how we made decisions, why we lived the way we lived, why we did what we did. So what we always say is that the challenges that we as Black people are having is due to the fact that we got away from our ancient culture and we started making unintelligent decisions. Our decisions weren't reasonable, they weren't sound, and that is what led to what the challenges that we're dealing with today is, excuse me, not making sound judgments. So now, if anyone has any questions on any of these words, I'll entertain them. If not, then we'll move on from there. Okay. So again, if anyone has any questions pertaining to uh, the subject matter I just addressed in these words or concepts, uh, we'll entertain it. If not, we'll move on. So now let's see. The next thing is that we want to address. Let's see. Okay. So one of the things I wanted to tackle is some of the concepts that we put in the different books and literature that we put out there. Here's a particular book we put out. This was a series of books we put out in the year 2000. 2001, we called it the Right Knowledge series. This is one of the books that we put out. Now, for those who do not know, a lot of our books actually are free on Scribes, so I highly recommend to get a membership on Scribes, which will give you access to a lot of the literature because a lot of people posted our books for free on Scribes. So, for those who do not know that, you can get access to a lot of our books. So, that's extremely important. Okay. So, this book here is called Our True Roots. And the reason why I'm bringing up this book is really important. When it comes to the master teacher, we have what is known as the author's note. And in this, the master teacher addressed what his purpose is. Okay. And I think is extremely important as to knowing what his purpose is, what we were teaching, why we teach what we teach, what his objective is. And so it says right here, says he says, I have devoted my visit to this planet to the resurrection of the mentally dead, which I affectionately refer to as mummies. Never did I know that the evil one had done such a great job with these people, both mentally and physically, as to have them hate self and kind. My greatest dilemma and hindrance has been the black devil, born amongst you and by you, married to you, socializing with you, praying in the same sacred houses of worship as you. But secretly, they have a spiritual pact with the devil, which makes it near impossible for them to totally surrender to Nawapu. But for the few chosen from the many called, I sift to find those beings that wish to become one with the supreme in all. So I, the supreme Grand Hierophant, Amenubi Re'achta, as I am known throughout the mystical schools, the incarnation of Tahuti, student of the great tomb, known as Atum Re, the first point of resurrection from ignorance to right knowledge, right wisdom, and right understanding. I have blended in with each of the religions most interesting to my people. I live as one of them, practice as one of them, in order to reveal the misconceptions of these doctrines that have plagued and diseased the minds of my people. So, I find it extremely important to bring this up because in this particular book, it explains very clearly what the master teacher's goal and objective has been. So I repeat, he says, I have dedicated my visit to this planet to the resurrection of the mentally dead. And that's why I was telling you before about one of those key words is resurrection. Resurrection. We have to be resurrected back into consciousness of our ancient culture, of who and what we are by natural nature. And this is what our whole doctrine is based on. Our whole doctrine is based on getting ourselves back into the mindset of our ancient culture. That is what's going to teach us when it comes to making correct decisions, once again, sound, reasonable decisions, sound, right decisions, because we're making decisions right now that are not sound, they're not reasonable, and they're the cause of our suffering. So it is important that anyone who are studying our culture and who's studying our doctrine, I want you guys to be extremely clear and aware of what our doctrine's about, so that you understand your place in our culture and how what your goals should be. Every student's goal is supposed to be resurrection. I repeat, every student's goal is supposed to be resurrection. Okay? That's extremely important. There should not be any uncertainty what your goal is. Now, let's see. I want to tackle the concept of resurrection a little bit further into what that means. Now, we put out a book. The master teacher put out a book also back in like 2001 that addressed this subject matter completely, the subject matter of resurrection. And the name of the book was called Is There Eternal Life After Death? Is there eternal life after death? Now, let me see if um, we have this book on file. I'm looking for it. I'm looking for it, but I don't see it. But that's okay. We have another book. That's one book, and it's another book I want to guys to show you guys. Okay. So here's another book, and let me bring this book up here so you guys can see the cover. Okay, this book is called The Science of Healing. Now, we put this book out, I think, way back in 1996. We put this book out way back in 1996. Okay, to be exact, The Science of Healing. Now, if you go to page, let's see, I believe it's page 82. Page 82. Okay. Now, this on page 82, this right here, this book. Let me see. Let's go here. Let's see this. Click this more. You can see this. Okay. All right. So now page 82. Now this book here talks about uh, the human being has dormant senses. The human being has dormant senses, and part of that dormant senses is what we have dormant, which is what we call our third eye. Now, I don't know if anyone's familiar with the concept of the third eye. If you are familiar with the concept of the third eye, can you press, for those who are in the chat, can you press number 2? If your concept or you're familiar with the concept of the third eye, can you press number 2? And if you're not familiar with the concept of the third eye, press number 1. For those who are familiar with the concept of the third eye, can you press number 2? And for those who are not familiar with the concept of the third eye, press number 1. Okay? That's extremely important. Let's see. I'm going to explain. What's that? Tabuna, Nupuna. I'm sorry if I messed your name up. Let me just say this for all anyone who comes into our classes, our chats, everything here is. Remember, I said our whole doctrine is about getting back to the power of love based on ashak, what we call ashak. Okay, so all discussions are based on the positive, right? All discussions and everything we do is based on the positive. I have no problem addressing anyone's questions, claims, or concerns. That's what I'm here to do. I dedicated my life for the last 30 years trying to educate our people with this information. Okay, so I just want to make that clear. I have no problem addressing any questions or concerns about what we teach. This is extremely important, right? So, what is the third eye, right? So let me try to explain that because this is extremely important because this is now we're dealing with the concept of resurrection, right? That's what I was talking about. The third eye is a very simple concept. Everyone experiences the third eye when you go to sleep and you dream. Everyone experiences the third eye when you go to sleep and you dream. All the third eye is when your eyes are closed, you're still able to see things within your mind. That's another form of sight. Okay? Your third eye is another form of sight outside of your two normal eyes. Because the human being obviously has two eyes. And the human being can see with the left eye, and the human being can see with the right eye. And when we say the third eye, it's a third level of sight, is what the third eye is. And all the third eye is everyone experience it to the extent when you dream and you're seeing things in your dream. Or you can imagine, you can close your eyes and you can imagine something and you can vividly see that. Okay? So that is, you have another form of sight. Okay? And that's all it is. That's all the third eye is. It's another form of sight outside of your normal two eyes. Now, so when we talk about resurrection, you can develop that third eye, that other form of sight, where you have the ability to see or to extend your sight with the third eye. You have the ability to see into what we call, what we teach is other dimensions. Other dimensions, and that gets into a whole nother subject matter, which is what are dimensions. Now we will get into that, into those topics right now, but I'm not going to address that at this time. Okay. So, but the point is this: the third eye is another form of sight, and it is dormant within the average individual. It's not developed, but it can be developed. And so when we talk about resurrection, what we're talking about is being able to develop your higher senses. The human being has dormant senses within themselves that's not fully developed. And you can develop those senses through certain spiritual works or certain types of exercises. Okay? So this page that I have here from this book, The Science of Healing, it talks about the human being has three levels of consciousness. Level one is, or level A, which is normal consciousness. Okay, and that's the average individual. You have normal conscious awareness of your surroundings. Okay. Now, but there's another level of consciousness which we call the subconscious level. The subconscious level, which means that there's another layer of consciousness that you have, and that other layer of consciousness, we call it the subconscious, which is meaning you're subtly or partially aware of it. Your subconscious is what controls your heart rate. It controls your circulatory system. It controls your nervous system. Okay? But you don't have full control of it. It controls your breathing, meaning we have the ability to control our breathing through our normal consciousness, right? But when we're not thinking about it, the subconscious takes over the breathing process. And so there's another layer of consciousness, because let me explain this. The body cannot function without thought. There are no actions. There's nothing that can be done unless you think about it. I repeat, there's nothing you can do physically unless you think about it. And so thought is always being processed within the human being, whether you are conscious of it or partially conscious of it. And that goes into the subconscious level. Okay? And then there's another layer of consciousness within a human being, and we identify that layer of consciousness called the superconscious level. The superconscious level. Now, this is another or a higher layer of consciousness. When you're able to tap into your superconsciousness, this is where you are able to open up another form of sight, which is what we call your third eye, where you're able to see other layers of existence. For instance, they make it very clear that the human being, or excuse me, they make it clear when you're dealing with light and the human, everyone who's on earth, you see because of light. But light exists as what we call a full spectrum. They call it the full spectrum of light or full spectrum light. But the human being is on a narrow bandwidth of this spectrum of light. They're only able to perceive a narrow. As African people, we have the ability to perceive the whole spectrum, not just the narrow bandwidth, what they call visible light. We have the ability to perceive a broader bandwidth of the full spectrum light. In fact, if you guys look in, I guess to me it would be my upper right hand corner. Maybe you guys looking at it. I don't know if it's the left hand corner. I have an image here where my arrow, where my pointer is, my cursor pointer, and this is an image I actually copied from a book by our esteemed scholar by the name of Jewel Pookrum. It's a sister. She was a medical doctor, and she put out a book where she addresses this subject matter about other races of people, how they're able to perceive different levels of light of the light spectrum. We as African people have a higher level of a perception if we develop it, where we can perceive full spectrum light. Okay, so that's extremely important. Extremely important. So the question then becomes, well, how are we able to do it? We're able to do it by tapping into our super conscious level of awareness. And when you tap into your super conscious level of awareness, this dormant sight, which they call the third eye, becomes active and it becomes aware. Okay? So that's extremely important. This dormant level of sight becomes active and it becomes aware. One becomes aware. So this particular book that I'm pointing out, this particular book goes into that subject matter, which is the science of healing. Now, let's see. There is another book that we put out, but unfortunately, I don't think I have it. I don't know if I have it in my files. I was talking. It's called the "Is There Life? Is There Eternal Life After Death?" And in that particular book, we deal with the concept of resurrection pretty thoroughly. Okay, but the reason why I brought up this book, which is the Science of Healing book, is simply because when we talk about a mental resurrection, we're talking about you're able to tap into your higher level of consciousness, where you develop this second awareness, or this higher awareness, or this higher level of sight and perception. This is something our ancestors naturally had. Our ancestors naturally had this higher level of perceptions. In fact, our ancestors to this day, some of them still have it. Some of them still have it. In the Khoisan that we descend from, the Khoisan who live out of South Africa, they have rituals that they do to this very day that allows them to tap in to their higher levels of consciousness. Okay, the Khoisan to this day do rituals that allows them to tap in to this higher level of consciousness. They call it Noom. They call it Noom. When you high level consciousness, in fact, let me just type this out for you guys. Let me just see if I can get this. And Noom, that's how they pronounce it or spell it. That's how it's spelled, and that's how they pronounce it. It's like Noom. Uh, and this is something that our ancestors in South Africa called the Khoisan to this very day, they tap into higher levels of consciousness. When they tap into, they call it Noom, and when they tap into these higher levels of consciousness, they're able to astral travel. It's similar to, if anyone watched that movie, Doctor Strange. And in that particular movie, Doctor Strange, they introduced a lot of these concepts and principles. In that particular movie, Doctor Strange, they introduced a lot of these concepts and principles. Okay. In fact, the History Channel did a whole episode on introducing this concept of Noom. In fact, when you guys have the time, you can look into it. If I can find the actual clip that they did, I'll try to show it to you. But I don't know if I can find it. Let me see. If I can find it, because I think it's extremely important that you become aware of this. Let's see. I think it was season 7. See if I can find it. This is it right here. South ancient alien South African tribe travels to other dimensions. So you guys can actually look into it. And it talks about the Khoisan out of South Africa who are able to astral travel, and they're able to tap into their higher levels of consciousness. So this is an ability that our ancestors have. This is an ability that we as Africans who are descendants of the Sands tribe, this is an ability that we still have. We just forgot how to develop that part of ourselves. And that's what we call resurrection. What we call resurrection is to tap into your higher levels of consciousness. Resurrection is about being able to tap into your higher levels of consciousness. So this is extremely important for you guys. If you have the time, you can watch this particular episode. that goes into this particular topic and subject matter. Okay, it's a real ability. It's a real ability. But again, we forgot these inner abilities that we have that's dormant within us. We forgot these inner abilities that are dormant within us. And this is something that we taught. This is something that the master teacher has been teaching these concepts. Oh, he's been teaching us now for over 40 years. How to develop your inner abilities, your higher senses, your higher senses of awareness. Okay. And so uh this is just one of the things. So again, for those who see that, that's very important. So, like I said, this concept of resurrection, it's extremely important. So let me uh, take time out. Does anyone have any questions pertaining to any of the things that we're talking about? Does anyone have any questions pertaining to any of the things? Okay, I see uh, Tarnub, but those are just statements because there's a lot. Let's see. So the dreams are the spirit world. It has nothing to do with third eye. Okay. All right. It's about reasonability. Please. Is the mind doctor deposit? Okay. Okay. So does anyone have any particular questions? And again, just to make sure everyone is on point and still hearing me, please type one so I make sure everyone is following. Please type one just to make sure that everyone is following me. Uh, that's important. So I can see. All right, so that's great. So what is this? One does have an inner sight called the third eye, even in the nature of nature books. Book one, it states if a person sees person or things, is in the stream. Okay. Okay, that's great. So I'm glad everyone's still following me. So that's important. So that's why I recommend that particular uh, history channel who does an expose on this concept we call Noon. Okay, they basically go into that and they talk and they in essence they talk about this ability that our ancestors to this day they're doing it right now as we speak. They still have this ability to tap into their higher levels of consciousness. So that's extremely important, and this is what we call resurrection. What we call resurrection is being able to open up your third eye, fully open up your third eye, and allows you to be able to tap in to your higher levels of conscious awareness. Okay, so that's extremely important. Now, why is that important, or I should say, why should we uh, be focused on that? The reason why you should be focused on opening up your third eye and tapping into your uh, higher levels of consciousness is because, as I said, we have dormant senses. We have more than just the normal five senses, which is see, hear, taste, smell, and touch. We have four higher senses, which is intuition, psychometry, clairvoyance, and telepathy. We have the ability to communicate mind to mind. This is something also when researched, the Tahites, the San people, and the Tahites of the Congo, they still to this day have some of these abilities, being able to communicate mind to mind, which is telepathy. That's a dormant sense that we as Africans, we still have that. It's just not developed. So we have higher senses, other senses within ourselves that's not developed. Okay. And so this is why it is important to be aware of it, because right now we're operating from a handicapped position as humans. We're not using all of our abilities, all of our capabilities. And so our whole concept of resurrection is to get us back to where we are using all of our capabilities, because again, our whole culture was based on being in tune with nature. Today we live Western culture and we're completely out of tune with nature. And the reason why we're out of tune with nature is because we're not tapped into our higher senses. We used to know if there was going to be a tsunami or an earthquake or a hurricane. The same way the animal kingdoms to this day are aware of earth changes. We used to be in harmony with the planet. And so we knew when things were we knew not to build a house on in Tornado Valley, where Europeans to this day they'll build a house on the side of a mountain, then comes a landslide and destroy their home. These are things that we would never do, because again, we were in tune with nature. We knew where to be and where not to be. Now we're not in tune with anything, and that's because our senses are out of whack. Okay, so the how can I say, existence is boundless. Existence is boundless, and we supposed to be aware of existence and its ever changing cycles of existence, and we're not aware anymore. And this is what the problem is, because we have adapted to foreign cultures. We live in foreign cultures today, and because we're living European cultures, it has got us out of tune with existence, or it's got us out of tune with nature itself. That's why I said our ancestors lived uh, lived based on certain principles, and that core principle was ma'at. Okay, you have a question? Let's see. What exactly are we tapping into? What are we tapping into? Please elaborate. I have a question. Okay, so Tar Buna, what's your question? When you say what are we tapping into, please elaborate. When you say what are we tapping into, Mayor, I guess I would have to ask you to elaborate when you're saying what are we tapping into. What is your question trying to say? I guess I'm not clear on what your question is trying to say when you ask what are we tapping into. So maybe you can try to make yourself clear, because when again, I was talking about the concept of resurrection, right? And I'm talking about we have dormant abilities and dormant senses that we're not utilizing. So it's not an essence of what are we tapping into. It's an essence of using those dormant abilities and becoming more conscious and more aware of your natural self, right? So that's the whole goal. The whole goal is to become more conscious and aware of your natural self. So it's not so much what we're tapping into, is what we're not. How can I say? Is it's you know what it's like? It's the same reason why a lot of our people have health problems through to through to negativity and bad diet. Our people lose their natural senses. For instance, our people suffer from cataracts, where they begin to lose their eyesight. Our people suffer from sense of taste because of bad diet or certain types of illnesses. Our people are suffering from hearing loss. Our people are suffering from sense of smell, all due to the body is not functioning at its optimum peak. And so you begin to lose functionality. Your senses begin to be dormant. And so what I'm saying is the average human being is in tune with their basic senses, which is the five: see, hear, taste, smell, touch, right? But you also have dormant senses that's not developed. Yes, reason is a sense. Reason is another sense that we have. And so, and this is kind of what I'm saying. And not everyone reasons. So there are senses that we have that's just not developed, and that's what I'm talking about. The third eye is just another dormant sense within the human being, within the African, that we have the ability. It's there, but it's not developed. You know, it's not developed, and it can be developed. That's the point. Now, the question uh, is you're asking the question: is it through meditation? Yes, meditation is one of the methodologies. First of all, before we get into that, here's the thing. And when it comes to developing your higher senses, right? When it comes to develop your higher senses, yes, Buna, we as a race, we did lose our reasonability. That's what we're talking about here. We're talking about is getting back to our reasonability, which is our natural way of doing things, right? Because we're when we say we lost our reasonability, the problem is we're living foreign cultures, and it's about getting back to our original culture and how we existed as a people. And that original culture, we had certain principles that we lived by, and that's what we were talking about earlier. So, in order to tap into those higher senses that I was talking about, let's go back to the list. Number 5, morphic resonance. Morphic resonance. Okay. Now, everything in existence vibrates. Everything in existence vibrates. Even things that appear to be stationary or standing still vibrates, because everything is made of elements. Everything in existence is made of elements, and elements are and what are elements? Which is the what we call the atoms. Excuse me. And so you have protons, electrons, and neutrons, and you have the electron orbiting the protons. So everything at its subatomic state, it's vibrating. Nothing is stationary. We have the illusion of thinking things are stationary because we're not tapped into that sense. And this is what I'm saying. You're vibrating at a certain resonancy. The human being right now is vibrating at a certain resonancy. But you have the ability to raise your resonancy. You have the ability to raise your vibration. And there are things you can do to raise your vibration, certain techniques. Meditation is one of those techniques. Concentration exercises is another technique. Okay? Chanting. Chanting is another technique to raise your vibration. Chanting is another technique to raise your vibration. So these techniques our ancestors all did. They did meditation exercises. They did concentration exercises, and they had chants, ritualistic chanting, which raises your vibration and stimulates your pineal gland. When you raise your vibration, you're able to stimulate your pineal gland, which also vibrates. And this is what opens you up to those dormant senses. This is what opens you up to those dormant senses that we talk about. Okay. So the key here is morphic resonance. Morphic resonance. That's the key. that you have to be aware of is your morphic resonancy. And I'm going to highlight this particular word. Morphic resonance. You have to raise your morphic resonance, and there are key rituals that you have to do in order to raise your morphic resonance. And I just explained those specific rituals: meditation, concentration exercises, chanting. Now, here's the thing though. When you're tapping in, when you begin to raise your vibration, you're moving into other layers of existence within this layer. Okay? You're moving into other layers of existence. For instance, the next layer of existence we identify as the plane of force. And let me try to get a chart. I'm going to try to show a chart that goes into the other layers. Let's see if I can find it. Okay, I'm gonna bring this up because I want to introduce you guys into the other layers. Now we're back at the book, The Science of Healing, and in this particular book, is I can show you the different. We go into the different layers now. As far as Tarbuna, the resurrection is mental. Yes, everything is mental. Everything is mental. Okay, so when you raise your conscious awareness, you become aware of other levels of existence because the universe is boundless. We live in an omniverse of existence. So that's important to understand. We live in an omniverse of existence. So let's go. Let me go here. And I want to see if I can find what I talked about. The different layers. Okay, let's see. What do you mean exactly when you say we have to tap and to use our third eye? I explained the third eye. I explained that it's another level of awareness, another level of sight. It's similar. It's the same thing when you're dreaming. You have another level of sight. Your eyes are closed, but you're seeing. You're able to see in your dream world. So that's another level of sight. It's a third vision of awareness. But in a dream world, that's illusion, which is created through your hippocampus area of the brain that creates illusions. Okay, but you also have the ability with that same vision to see reality. So you can see illusions through imagination using your third eye, or if you want to see reality, then you have to raise your vibration where you're able to now perceive more layers of the spectrum. As I said, full spectrum light. The human being is only seeing visible light. I do recommend everybody to look that up. That the human being, normal eyesight, you're only seeing the normal spectrum of light, but which they call visible light. But but the spectrum is so massive. You're able to tap into other layers. Now, if you research the Dogon tribe in Mali, it is said that they have the ability or have abilities to pierce into other layers of perception. Now, this is why in African culture we have certain rituals. Let me just say this to enhance your third eye. So it started from childbirth. Okay, from one of the rituals we used to do when a child was born, the child would not be brought into the daylight for 8 days. They would keep the child in darkness for the first 8 days of birth. Why did they do that? They did that to increase the child's melatonin. They kept the child in darkness for the first 8 days to increase the child's melatonin levels. Black people naturally see better than any other race of people at night. I repeat, Black people naturally see better than any other race of people at night. It's a natural ability we have. Okay? It's a natural ability. One of the harms that is, again, by living European culture, we're around artificial light, and it disrupts our melatonin production. We're producing more serotonin than melatonin. Okay, so excuse me. So that's important to know. Okay, and so when you're da, 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 I just want to find, if I can find in this particular book, I believe we go into it. These layers. Hold on. Using our best mind and being positive. Deep reasoning to solve your problems and also to come up with the best answers to questions. Okay. Now I'm just trying to find you guys in this particular book. We go into the different um the different planes of existence. There are different. There are levels. There are different levels of planes of existence. Okay, that's important to know. So when you're opening up your third eye, you're able to tap into these different planes of existence, because right now we're experiencing the material plane, and the material plane is the lowest vibration that the human being is aware of. Where we are aware of the material plane, but the next plane up is called the plane of force. Now, what is a plane? Plane is different layers of vibration. So, for instance, the human body is made up of different layers of vibration. Okay, your hand is one layer of vibration. Your hand is different from your nail, your fingernails. The fingernail is a different level of material, and the material is a different vibration, and it's different from your eyeballs, and it's different from your internal organs, and it's different than your hair follicle. These are different vibrations just within the human body, and that's called different planes. All of existence is based on that, and that's the difference between gas, liquid, and solid. Those are different layers, different vibrations within the material realm. And then you have higher layers of material vibration, right? So when you go from solid to liquid to gas, those are different planes, and it goes deeper. This is where the Europeans, Caucasians, get into what they call quantum mechanics and quantum physics. This is how they was able to figure out electricity, because electricity is at another level of another vibration. It's dealing with the electron, which are subatomic particles. When you're dealing with subatomic particles, you're dealing with quantum physics. Quantum, another level, another layer of existence. Okay, but we as African people have the ability to tap into these different layers of existence. We can tap into those vibrations, but you have to raise your vibration to tap into other levels of vibration. This is what we're trying to show or explain. And if I can find it, I'm going to try to find it. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. So now this is on page, it starts on page 28 of the same book, The Science of Healing. And so if you see, you have the first plane, the material plane. This is what the human being, this is what we're all tapped into, the material plane. This is low vibrations of materials on this dimension. And you have different vibratory levels, right? Which is solid, liquid, and gas. Okay, but then you have other finer levels of material, but they're high, they're vibrating higher. And so in order to perceive it, you have to tap into that level. You have to become aware, you have to raise your vibration to do it. So the next level is the plane of force. And then after the plane of force, you have what we call the spiritual plane. And after the spiritual plane, you have the mental plane. And this is what is it. How can I say? When you get into the mental plane, that's the fourth layer. This is where the scientific community today are getting lost because they're trying to figure out where is consciousness at. They're trying to figure out at what level does consciousness come in, because they now know consciousness is not local to the brain. I repeat, they now know consciousness is not local to the brain. So they're trying to figure out at what layer of existence that consciousness takes place. Your consciousness is vibrating on what we call the mental plane. That's another vibration of existence. The mental plane. That's extremely important. Okay? The mental plane. And once you go past the mental plane, the next plane that we have is the plane of divine truth. Let me pull this down. And then you have the plane of divine reality. And then we have, this is an old book, we said the bosom of Anu, which just translate as the Most High. That's when you're tapped into what we call Pa'ut. When you're tapped into the creation force, which is Pa'ut. It is the creative force. And that's what that was the last principle I have here, Pa'ut. That is the actual creation force that you're able to tap into, to become aware of, to be in harmony with. This is the ultimate goal. Okay? This is the ultimate goal of what we call, or I should say, what we're talking about is the subject matter is resurrection. The goal is to become in tune again with the creative force, to be in harmony with the creative force. Once you're in tune again with that creative force, right, then you're able to make decisions in alignment with nature itself. You'll be in harmony with the cycles of nature itself. Right now, as African people worldwide, we're out of sync with the cycles of nature. We're completely out of tune. And the goal is to get back in tune, but there's certain levels of spiritual practices that we have to reinitiate ourselves back into. And that's this is what we call our ancient culture of Wu Sabat. Our ancient culture of Wu Sabat was about being in harmony back with these ancient forces. Being back in harmony with nature itself, being in tune again with nature itself. And that's a process. But because we live under the Caucasian rulership, the Caucasians are totally physical. They're totally materialistic. The whole society is based on materialism. That's what capitalism is all about. And we as African people have embraced that foreign culture, and it's destroying us and destroying the planet as it, for instance, you're not supposed to be drilling up all the oil from the earth. But the Caucasian, because he's not in tune with anything, he'll cut down all the rainforests. He doesn't care. He pollutes the oceans. He's not in tune with nature. destroying ourselves. And that's because we got away from living our ancient culture. We got away from being connected to nature itself. You can't reconnect until you understand what happened to you. And this is what we're trying to explain. We're trying to teach. Now, let's keep this in mind. All original African culture was spirituality connecting to nature. All original African culture was spirituality connected to nature. But right now on a continent in Africa, only about 15% of our people are still practicing some of their indigenous culture, spiritual practices, whether it be Yoruba, Ifa, the Dogon have their spiritual practice, the Zulu have their spiritual practice, but the mass majority or the vast majority of Africans on the continent are either Christian, Muslim, or Jews. And all three of those religions come out of Mesopotamia. All three of those religions. In fact, what they did was they created their religions from our African spirituality. The European Caucasian religions of Christianity, Islam, and Judaism all copied from our ancestors. They took our spiritual practices and turned it into these religions. That's why when you look at Islam, for instance, in Islam is based on the 5 pillars of faith, which is the 5 pillars of faith in Islam is praying during fasting during the month of Ramadan, making zakat given to charity, bear witness to the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, bear witness to the creative force. And number 5th pillar is what did they say? What did I say? They said pay zakat, bear witness to the creative force, make prayer 5 times a day, fast the month of Ramadan, and make Hajj, make a pilgrimage to Mecca. Those are the 5 pillars of faith. Do you know that all 5 of those pillars of faith come out of ancient Egypt? In ancient Egypt, we fasted 30 days out of the month. That's where they got the Ramadan from. In ancient Egypt, we did salat, we did prayers. In fact, we did the same exact positions that the Muslims do in ancient Egypt. In ancient Egypt, we had a pilgrimage. That's what the temples of Karnak we had the temples of Karnak where our ancestors would make a pilgrimage to these temples, and we did certain rituals there. Right? The Muslims got all of this stuff from us. Our whole culture was, take care, give to the needy, give charity. That's a principle in Islam that they got from us. So what I'm trying to show, this is where the Romans control ancient Egypt. That's what our good esteemed elder brother by the name Asher Kwesi, he's been going to ancient Kemet for the last 30 years, exposing how all of these religions plagiarize from ancient Kemet, taking our culture and rewriting it for their purposes. Basically, what they did was they took our spirituality and they deleted the science, and they fed it back to their people based on faith, and just told them to practice these things based on faith with no knowledge. We did these rituals because we understood the science of these rituals. Religion has no science. Religion just, everything is based on faith. You just got to believe. There was no science. They took the science out of it. This goes back to how the Europeans even set up their scientific communities. A guy by the name of Francis Bacon, who's supposed to be one of the fathers of science, and he introduced empirical studies for the Europeans that he got from the Moors. And the Moors who ruled ancient Spain, who taught the Caucasian these sciences. We also had, in conjunction with empirical science and empirical science, we had metaphysical science. The Caucasians took metaphysical science out of the scientific community and they put that in the secret societies. That's why they don't want to acknowledge metaphysics, because it's a part of all the European secret societies, because that's where real power lies, in spiritual knowledge. It is our ignorance to spirituality why we're suffering as a people. And we're the mothers and fathers of spiritualities. We're the ones who taught spirituality to everyone else on the planet. And yet we don't know spiritual sciences no more, because we're stuck in these false religions that does not teach any knowledge. It just teaches you to believe in abstract stuff. And all of existence is based on spirituality and spirit forces. And let me just say this. When you're talking about spirituality, all you're talking about is energy. Spirit means energy, different levels of energies of existence. That's all it means. It ain't that deep. And this is one of the first things the master teacher was trying to introduce. And I showed you guys. Let me go back to the principles. Principle number 6, spirit and soul. What is spirit and what is soul? Our people don't even realize they have a spirit and soul no more. This was the ancient Egyptian reality. The soul was called the Ba, and the spirit was called Jaka. We understood that as Africans. Everything in existence has a spirit. If it has a life force, if it's a living entity, it has a spirit force. But not everything has a soul. A soul is totally different. And again, you're talking about layers of energy, different vibrations of layers of energy. Your spirit comes from the universe that you live in. Your soul is the essence of Pa'ut. It comes from existence itself. There's a huge difference between spirit and soul. And we're the only ones, students of the master teacher, that even teach this, because the Caucasian and religious people, they convolute the meaning. They teach you spirit is soul and soul is spirit. They convolute the teachings, not knowing or not letting people know that in ancient Kemet, aka Egypt, our ancestors made clear distinctions between a Ka, which is your spirit, and your Ba, which is your soul. Those are two different things. Two different forces. Okay. Let's see. That's right. Fasting, fasting is another level of spiritual development, right? Fasting is another level of spiritual development. That's why, again, like I said, we practice a 30-day fast in ancient Kemet. In fact, after the Prophet Muhammad died, Egypt was the first thing the Muslims attacked. After the Prophet Muhammad died, they attacked Egypt, Kemet. They was getting all the knowledge. The Greeks, it was first the Greeks, then the Romans, then the Pale Arabs was getting all and siphoning all our knowledge. These are the facts. These are the facts of our culture. So again, let's see where we at. We're gonna be wrapping up pretty soon. It's 8:39. We're gonna be wrapping up pretty soon. But I just want to make an announcement. Every Tuesday, right? Every Tuesday, we're going to be on here addressing different types of subject matter. In fact, I wanted to get into explaining or talking about the master teacher. Who is the master teacher? Dr. Malachi Z.K. York. Unfortunately, we didn't have time to do that. Just put up his image. We didn't have time to do that, to get into where I even learned this knowledge from, is from the master teacher. And I think it's important for anyone who's studying our culture, who's learning about our doctrine, know who the master teacher is, know how we got this wisdom. In fact, next week, for sure, we're going to talk about who is Dr. Malachi Z.K. York. Why is he so significant? What makes him so special? What makes him so important? And for those who don't know, he's unfortunately sitting in a jail cell because a Caucasian wrongfully imprisoned him. And that's another subject matter we have to address. There's been so much controversy over the master teacher and his situation when dealing with the Caucasian court system. So many people are ignorant to his situation. So many people do not know, and you know what's sad about it? You got tons of people who makes all these accusations about the master teacher based on hearsay data, but these are the same people that will argue that they're intelligent and they make decisions based on facts when a lot of their claims is based on hearsay data, and it's pretty sad. um, is really sad. And so it's extremely important to explain who the master teacher is, why he's significant, what he represents, what he came to teach. And so I'm gonna try my best to break that down in the clearest details. We will be doing an actual video, something I've been work. We got sidetracked unfortunately because we wanted to do a video just detailing the innocence of the master teacher. That first of all, they locked him up to stop the mission of resurrection. This is why they came and locked him up and stole our land from us and basically stole our land and destroyed it because we set up a community for the sole purpose of teaching our people spirituality and spiritual development. We built pyramids and we built different types of rituals on the land, different structures we built for the development of the individual spiritually. And this is the last thing the Caucasian wanted to be exposed to Black people ourselves spiritually to develop our higher senses. They go out their way to make sure we don't open up our third eye, which is why they poison us through the food system, they poison us through the media, they poison us through the music industry, and they poison us through religion. They're doing everything in their power to keep our vibrations low. They're doing everything in their power to keep our vibrations low. And we were the only ones, our organization, by way of the master teacher, that set up a community for the sole purpose of teaching our people spirituality and to teach them how to develop their spiritual senses. We're the only ones that were doing that, who created a actual community and land and rituals for that purpose. No one else has did that in the West. And that frightened the heck out of the Caucasian. And everyone knows about COINTELPRO. Everyone knows about how the government is so focused is to stop what they call the rise of a Black Messiah. Excuse me. That is they're that paranoid of our inner abilities and our powers. The Caucasian is trying everything in his power to maintain power and control. He does not want resurrected Black people running around the earth, people that he can't control. Their whole agenda is to make sure that you don't resurrect. Their whole agenda is to make sure you don't develop yourself. They want you to continue to be a slave to their economic system. That's why I told you before, one of the principles, core concepts that we live by is to reestablish our relationships. Relationships is the greatest commodity there is. A relationship. The Caucasian set up his economic system so that you don't have to have a relationship no more. We lived as communities as Africans. We lived of, for, and by each other. That's the last thing the Caucasian wants you to do. He wants you totally dependent on his system. Meaning Black people right now worldwide, we can get rid of the Caucasian system almost instantaneously just by relating to one another, connecting and sharing resources. We have all the necessary resources we need as a people worldwide. When you look at us at globally, we wouldn't even need nothing from the European. We have every resource we can possibly think of. That's how we get independent of them, is being able to connect with one another and share and exchange resources the way our ancestors used to do it. That's how you break out of his economic traps. That's exactly how you break out of his economic traps, is again to you know start connecting again with each other. We have to start connecting with one another once again. That's through relationships. Rebuilding our relationships is of the utmost importance. Rebuilding our relationships. This is why I set up our own social network, which is NoopooCC.com. And again, I apologize for those who have signed up who couldn't log on. It's insane that we've been having all of this problems trying to get people to log back on. We just had a complex problem, and it's taken. I know it's taken a long time to get the site up and running, but we will. We definitely will get the site up and running efficiently. We solved a lot of the problems, but we're not completely done. But the reason why we set up this social engine is for us to be able to start connecting with each other globally to reestablish relationships. We need our own social engine. We don't need Facebook, who want to censor us. We need our own social network to connect Black people worldwide, and for us to start relating and sharing resources with each other. This is how we get independent of their system. So one of the things I ask for you guys is to help us build this channel, help us build up, help us get people more aware of what we're trying to do. So for those of you guys who are going to come next week or any week, please help build up this channel by inviting family, friends to log on, to join into the discussions. For those who have questions or concerns, by all means, we're here to address your questions and concerns. I repeat, watch our videos. We put up a lot of videos, as you guys know, and we recommended a lot of books for you guys to be studying. Again, the ultimate goal is resurrection. That is what our whole doctrine has always been about: resurrection, tapping into your dormant senses, raising your conscious awareness, tapping into your higher consciousness. But you can't do it if you're eating pork. You can't do it if you're negative. You can't do it if you're always complaining or you're depressed or whatever. The Caucasian, that's why the Caucasian set up his system to keep Black people constantly depressed. That's why he deprives us of economics, and he practiced racism against us to make sure that we're constantly struggling to pay rent, to pay your electric bill, to pay your heat bill, to buy food or whatever. He keeps us in perpetual stress. And you can't raise your vibration when you're constantly stressed. That's their goal. That is their goal. They keep you constantly stressed. And so that's why I said one of the first principles that I started with is the power of love. Our people forgot we as African people used to be the most loving people on earth. Love is a force. We must learn to embrace the power of love and not allow negative forces to throw us off our center. Again, when you allow negative forces to throw you off your center, you lose your ability to reason correctly. And Black people today have lost their ability to reason, to think straight, to analyze straight. We can't figure nothing out because we're constantly stressed all the time. Because we're not tapped in to the power of love, the frequency we call asha. You must tap in to the higher frequencies of existence. When you tap back into those existence by doing the rituals I was telling you about, this is how you tap into the power of love. And no one can take you off your center, no matter what they try to do. You maintain your center of love, and that allows you to think clearly, to come up with effective strategy when people try to take you off your center. So that's extremely important. Remember that. Asha, the power of love. I'm going to show these principles, these keywords every week. You guys must learn them, you must master them, you must understand them, and you must apply them. This is what will change your life for the better, because that's our goal. Our goal is resurrection, to get us back to ruling again and not being ruled by foreigners. That is our whole goal here. Our whole goal is resurrection. Our whole goal and objective is resurrecting. And you have to embody these principles to do it. You have to embody these principles to do it. So I repeat, as we say, each one teach one. So I say for next week, right? Invite family, friend, whoever. Invite family and friend so we can grow the discussion. We can get more people on board. Remember, the key is relationships. We need to get more people on board. Guys, invite family, friends, whoever. Bring people on board. Recruit, recruit, recruit. I can't stress that enough. I'm going to do my part, and that's my payment that I ask from you. I'm not charging anyone to do any lectures. I'm dedicated to putting this information out for the benefit of our people. The only payment that I'm asking in return from you guys is to promote, to get family, friends, whoever, to get people on in these discussions. Right? That's the goal. And for you guys to definitely ask questions, because I do want to address specific questions, because it's a lot of information. I know it's a lot of information that we teach, and so my goal is to be able to address any questions and concerns pertaining to what we teach. So before we close out, I'll just say, does anyone have any last thoughts, questions, or concerns? You have a couple of minutes. I'll address it. I'll address it if you do have any questions or concerns. Let's see. And let's see. There's a discussion going on in the chat, that's cool. That's cool. But no one has any questions or concerns pertaining to anything that we talked about. So again, I repeat, next week Tuesday, we're going to get into just talking about who the master teacher is, Dr. Malachi Z.K. York. So I just want you guys to be up and ready for that. And bring your questions, bring your concerns, because that's what we're here to do, is to address anyone's questions and concerns. Right? We're here to address anyone's questions and concerns. So I repeat, it's so important for you guys to write these principles down, to commit these principles, these concepts to memory, and every week we're going to be addressing, these principles. Every week we're going to be talking about it more in more detail. Okay, so that's you know that's going to be extremely important. We're gonna be addressing a lot of these questions and concerns in detail as the weeks go, because my goal is for you guys to be completely proficient on these concepts and what we teach. I just hopefully I was successful in making clear what our mission is all about. Our mission has always been about resurrection. I repeat, our mission has always been about resurrection. It's developing the self, developing yourself, your dormant senses. But you can only do it by being in the power of love. Remember that, Ashak, being within the power of love. Our people, we're so confrontational today. We're so adversarial today. We have low tempers, low tolerance for one another. We have to start loving one another. Stop judging each other. Start loving your people again. We're hurting. We all are hurting, man. We've all been hurt by these demons who've abused us for the last 500 years. Our people are hurting. But the first step is love, the power of love, getting in the power of love. Stop pointing fingers, stop judging your people. Get in the power of love, and that will increase your reasonability. They want you in the power of stress. They want you constantly stressed out, complaining. You can't reason like that when you're constantly complaining and challenging people. That's why we as Black people, we're not building anything anymore. We used to build. We built magnificent societies. We're not building because we're spending all our time worrying about insignificant things, complaining about all kinds of stuff. So I repeat, that's why I put number one, Ashak, the power of love. You cannot resurrect until you get into the power of love. Right? So I put the word out there and especially for those who are going to watch this discussion at a later time, because it's going to be on our YouTube channel. Uh, I expect everyone to show up next week, Tuesday from 7 to 9. Next week, Tuesday from 7 to 9. Next week, Tuesday from 7 to 9. Be a part of the solution. Be a part of the solution. Right? Next week, Tuesday from 7 to 9. So I'm going to get ready to sign out. Being that there's no questions or concerns, I hope we did our job. Like I said, explaining what our intent was to do was to explain what our goals are here, and our goal, like I said, is resurrection. Remember that our goal is resurrection, and we talked about how to go about doing that. And next week we'll address that subject matter again, but we're going to focus on who is the master teacher, Dr. Malachi Z.K. York, and why he is so important for us for this day and time. Until then, I bless you. I love you guys. I love our people. We have so much potential. We have so much potential. And once we get back into the power of love as an African race, our problems will be resolved. Once we get back into the power of love as an African race, our problems will be resolved. We have to stop the petty bickering. We can have disagreement. Disagreement comes through reasonability. We can reason out our disagreements. We can reason out all disagreements, but keep it within the power of love. Keep it within the power of love. Not everybody is on the same level. Not everyone is on the same level. Some people, it takes more time for them to develop to get to a certain point. That's okay. That's okay. But let's keep it in the power of love. The power of love is what allows you to maintain your level of reasonability. I repeat, The power of love is what allows you to maintain your level of reasonability. Until next week, peace, love, why do, family.